Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Stars Like Us. I am your host, Aliza Kelly, and today I am here with a full moon baby, a Libra Sun, Aries Moon, Libra Rising. We are going to have to talk about that a little bit because that's a fun, interesting, dynamic cardinal axis to be on. Bunny Michael. Bunny Michael is a spiritual coach and multidisciplinary artist who has dedicated their work to awakening higher self, the manifestation of love within all humans, deconditioned by the limitations of ego identity. What began as a viral meme series on Instagram, garnering over 200,000 followers, has now expanded to a popular advice podcast, XO Higher Self, and a book deal with Little Brown Imprint. Ferocious Books, set for publication fall 2023. Bunny is a Made in New York Women's TV, Film, and Theater Fund NYFA grant recipient and is currently co-creating, writing, and starring in a web series, What Would Higher Self Do? However, it has now come out. It has since dropped.
Yeah, I need to update that bio.
Bunny, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
First, let's get started talking about this new series, because I also have to tell our listeners that we're connected just a couple of months ago because were given access to this new Instagram subscriber feature. So obviously there were only 10 of us in the whole world, which was like really bizarre, wild, crazy.
Yeah.
And because it was such a small group, we have a message thread going on. So we've started to get to know each other. I subscribe to your subscription and you're giving different exclusives and early access. So I took advantage of the early access to your new series and I watched some of the episodes and they are so funny, so talented, so Cindy Sherman. So a lot of Cindy Sherman vibes. But can you tell us about the series and everything that you're dropping right now and working on?
Yeah, well, it started off as an idea of kind of bringing the memes to life because, I was making these memes where it would be like the voice of me and then the voice of my higher self, like really illustrating the shift in perspective. And that came about because around 2016, there was these evil Kermit memes going around. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like one Kermit and then another Kermit like shrouded in like the thing.
Of course, yeah.
It was like the negative. Yeah. It was like the negative thought or whatever.
I was on the internet then. I'm on the internet now. haven't logged off since.
Yeah.
No worries.
Well, at the time I was kind of going through like a tough time in my life. It was just like the ups and downs of career, bad breakup, all of that kind of stuff. And just really needed some kind of shift. And I started thinking about accessing like the higher perspective. So I was like, what if I made a meme, but it was not the lower thought, it was like the higher thought. And it became a practice for me just to do it my own spiritual practice and share it on Instagram without any expectations whatsoever. And then it just became something that people started to be interested in, and it kind of changed my life. And so now my work and every aspect of my work, including all the other mediums of it, are dedicated to bring about that message that everybody has the access to connect to the part of themselves that is beyond, our learned hierarchical beliefs, our judgments, our biases, any belief that really makes one person better than the other for whatever reason. So when I connected with a friend of mine who was a film director, we started just for fun, making little videos for Instagram. This was like before Reels, obviously, and before TikTok and stuff. And we were just making these like split screen videos of me talking to myself, sort of like a Parent Trap kind of vibe, no budget, And then we saw this grant that was going out and we're like, let's apply for it. See if we get it. And we got it. And then we sort of had this idea of creating, these short videos. But I quickly learned that like that grant money was definitely not enough to do the project. And so I had to do a Kickstarter and all of this whole long process. Anywho, ended up writing this series, and we're calling them parables because they're each like little lessons. And it's kind of like semi about my real life, but not really, basically about me playing a struggling artist, trying to make it in New York City. And it's just one 24-hour period in my life, where I wake up from waking up to like my mom calling me on the phone and pressuring me about getting a job, to an issue with my roommate, to going to therapy, and, going through all these different scenarios throughout the day where I have to access my higher self to give me a shift in perspective and help me get through those moments. So,
It's so great. I also am curious, like what does it entail to create something like that? Using grants, using Kickstarters. It's obviously like, it's not, I wouldn't say that the production looks low at all. It looks actually like very polished and really beautiful. And you have different actors and there's beautiful set designs. Like, how have you been able to create something to that scale?
Well, I have to say the people that I were able to come on to the project, were all artists and friends that really believed in the message and care a lot about helping people as well, and who also do professional work in their own field, but kind of craved doing something that had a little bit more meaning to them and felt better, because the film industry can be like really, really difficult for a lot of people. So I ended up working with these very professional, people, crew members and stuff like that for like not very much money. Some people all the actors work for free. It was really just like a project of love. And it took a lot of work, a lot of maneuvering, a lot of lessons about like money and asking people for things. I mean, if there's one, like, I felt like doing a Kickstarter was like a spiritual practice, because I had to face so many things by asking people, directly to support me in that way. And I'm talking about like tens of thousands of dollars. And I had never really been in that position before. And I really had to like understand that, I was worthy of that ask. So at every level and every stage of that project was a huge spiritual lesson. And that was what me and my collaborator really wanted to emphasize, that it wasn't about the finished project. It was literally about at every step, using the power of our higher self to get us through to the next stage. And, working with your best friend, collaborating with your best friend on a project too, was a huge learning lesson for me as well. So it was just really meta, because just along with the memes, like doing the memes has been my spiritual practice, even though I'm sharing it. And it's, for other people in some way, it's really been helpful to me. It was the same for this series too.
Yeah, I was really, really inspired by the series. And I have to say that, like, in full transparency, I was like, well, who's supporting this? Like, what's the studio? Like, is this a Netflix spinoff? Like, is this backed by Amazon? Like, I was looking for like, well, who's endorsing this? And to discover, through my freaky eighth house behavior, that like you were the creator and the producer and organized this and orchestrated the whole thing. I was like really blown away, because it's so hard it's so hard period. It's so hard to do things, but it's also so hard to do things when the bar is set so high of like what people's expectations are, the type of content people are used to absorbing, especially if it's a series, especially if they're video shorts. And that it takes a lot of courage to say, like, we're going to do this and we're going to keep this running and all systems go, even at, when it feels impossible, which I'm sure at many times it felt absolutely impossible.
Yes, there are plenty of moments like that. But I think what ends up happening, I feel like for all creators in a way, you have to get to a point where you kind of have to let go of expectations. And that's sort of how I approached it. I was just like, well, however it comes out, it comes out. We're doing the best that we can with what we have. And honestly, when it was actually all done, I was like, wow, like I didn't expect it to be like for me to like it as much as I did. I think because I was so close to it, and you always have insecurities and things like that. And I had been working on it for so long, But I think that the reason why was because throughout the whole thing, I just kept telling myself, it doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be what it is in this moment of time. And I really feel like that's the truth about all art and all creation, is it's just really capturing a moment in time in your own growth. Mm-hmm. And that's all it really needs to be.
Yeah. And I think that it's, I guess the reason that I'm so fixated and curious about it is because it speaks to very much a lot of the work that you are doing, which I guess is the meta layer of it. But it's, when I was a kid, and I had friends as a kid, I basically would, the type of friends that I wanted to hang out with were the friends that wanted to like make and create things with me. Those were my best friends. And many of them are still my best friends. And the spirit of us having a play date was like, let's, put on a whole production. We're going to do something. We're going to take it very seriously in the container. Like, my best friend, Emily, and I, we met when we were 6, we're still best friends. And it would be like, we both recall like getting together when we were 6 and 7 to be like, all right, how much time do we have? We got 7 hours. Like, what can we do in the 7 hours? Like, let's do it. Let's make it real. And obviously that truth and that play and that just like desire to create is so profound and so strong. And then as you get older, it gets harder and it gets more challenging and it gets whittled away. And then there's capitalism, and then there's also bills, and then there's that combined with the feelings of failure and putting yourself out there, and it just makes it so untenable. And I think that there are so many people who in many generations, on a multiple generational level, who have so much creative impetus and so much art that lives inside of them. But for a host of some of the reasons that I just said, and so many others, haven't been able to find containers or spaces to be able to apply it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that one thing that is good about the time that we're living in right now is because it's become very like blatantly obvious in a lot of ways that a higher production value doesn't necessarily make something more impactful or more relatable, even, and especially in the age of TikTok, where you're having people making videos in their bedroom and they have millions of views and they're making millions of people laugh or cry or whatever. It just really goes to show you that everybody is an artist and everybody is creative. And I'm really happy about the fact that there's access, a lot more access than there was. For me, I've always just been in a situation where I've had to make do with what I had. I mean, even when from the time I was very young and growing up without very much, to trying to make it as my own in the music industry, just doing everything independently, learning everything myself, teaching myself everything with YouTube videos or you name it. I've always been somebody that's just had to find creative solutions because I didn't have certain privileges or certain access to things. So I think in the long run, that actually was super beneficial for me, because I really had to understand what it was that was why it was what I was doing. What was the purpose behind it? Because if you don't know, what the purpose behind your work is, it's really easy to feel like you don't know that you can't do it without certain things, because you're trying to mirror something else, or you think it has to look a certain way in order to fit in.
Right.
And that's totally understandable. I mean, that's absolutely understandable. But I think you have to get to a point where you realize that your authenticity is your greatest asset. And whatever position you're in right now is your authenticity. And that is actually what people relate to way more than expertise, way more than experience. Is the people relate to people's like sincerity and honesty and vulnerability. I mean, that's really what moves people, because you're touching each other like on a higher self level. You're touching a part of them that they recognize in themselves. And so I just feel like we all have access to that. And money is definitely not going to make something good. You know, it just,
So real.
it doesn't.
Well, it can all, I mean, it ruins a lot of things. I mean, we've all seen Wayne's World. We all know what happens when which I think about all the time. I think it is like one of my favorite examples of how like a big commercial production company, like it would ruin something that is organic and beautiful, because there have been certain times, and I haven't been in a position yet where it's really been like, you know, I've been against, it's been like that sort of crisis of consciousness moment where it's like, Emma, is this going to blow it? You know, I haven't been presented with an opportunity where I'd be like, wow, I could really take this to a whole other level, but would it ruin the authenticity? Like this podcast, you know, I've been doing it for 3 years. It's always been exactly as it is. You know, it has not been sort of swept up in a greater conglomerate yet. But, you know, I think about like how precarious that is too. And I think about how dangerous it is when you take art and then you filter it through a corporation, or you filter it through stakeholders. And obviously, you know, I think the music industry is such a prime example of this. Like we hear this story like over and over, tale as old as time, of like artists, especially you know, in the up until I guess somewhat recently, when artists have been able to control their image a little bit more on social media, but their entire premise being sucked out of them. And then the music industry just being like, well, that didn't work. And then in the meantime, they made all of these albums that didn't reflect their art. They changed their image, like totally destroyed that joy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's why I feel like, you know, when people feel kind of bogged down by the slow trajectory of, say, their art career or their passion or whatever creative pursuit they're doing, you know, like I always kind of want to say like, hey, you know, all of these steps are informing so much, you know, because when it does happen, you want to be in a position where you know your power, where you know what it is that you're bringing to the table. Because if it happens too soon, you're not going to really be able to see that. And that's when you get into collaborations or situations where you get taken advantage of, or maybe you didn't realize what would actually be best for what it is that you're trying to like manifest in the world. So I know that the things that are happening, even though, you know, I'm almost 40 right now. And of course, you know, 10 years ago, I would have, if I had known it was going to take another 10 years to, you know, be in the position that I am now, I would have been like, boo-hoo, you know, woe is me. But now I see, oh, wow, like this is happening exactly at the right time, because even a year prior, I wouldn't have had the insight and the confidence that I have now in really understanding my purpose. It took that long for a reason.
Totally. I tell people all the time, I'm constantly trying to, especially for folks that are in their 20s, you know, the 20s are the thing with the 20s and the thing with your Saturn return at the end of it is that it is such a paradigm shift in understanding that race to have the success, to have the accolades, to have the accomplishment, to make that fucking Forbes 30 under 30 list or whatever stupid ass like publicity irrelevancy, you know, that feels so important when you're an artist or you are an ambitious person of any capacity. If you want to make stuff and create stuff in your 20s, it can often feel like you need that outside validation, that outside recognition in order for you to be legitimate, you know? And then that coupled with insecurities, coupled with egos, coupled with jealousy and comparison, obviously makes it so that our 20s can feel like this really just hyper challenging time where if you don't have everything figured out by the time you reach 30, you're fucked. But the truth is, and what I'd like to remind people is that if you think you have everything figured out before your Saturn return, you're actually fucked, you know, because that's going to come and swing and like change everything and recalibrate everything in your life. And on the other side of it, you're going to step into your 30s with so much more confidence, so much more like depth of character, so much more awareness of who you are and what you want to be doing, versus feeling like your identity is going to be clarified through these external validation points.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, actually, I was kind of on this like trajectory of success in my 20s. I was part of this music collaboration with my partner, and we had a record deal and we were touring and being in all these magazines and all of this sort of unexpected quick success, and it really went to my ego. I mean, because I didn't know, the only example I had for other successful artists happened to be extremely egotistical people. So I thought, in my mind, I'm just trying to like mirror what it looks like to be cool and famous and popular and all of those kinds of things. And, not realizing how amazing the situations I was in, nothing was enough. I was always looking at the lack. And then it completely fell apart, and I had to totally start from scratch. And of course, that's that Saturn return.
Was that at the Saturn return?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was also like that relationship I was in was like abusive. So there was a lot of, I basically went from feeling I was like on top or like in this trajectory towards major success, and I was getting like A&R meeting with like Atlantic Records, to literally not having a quarter to make a phone call because I was like bloody in my face from being like punched in the face. Like that was that was like how bottom I had to get before I realized like what was really important. And so since that time, it's just been like this very slow, steady healing and growth and constant spiritual check-in, and just all of that kind of stuff. And I'm very content right now to have faith in the timing of things, because I really realized that that's just faith, that having faith in that is like key, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also throughout my 20s, I recall, like when I graduated from college with my art history and studio art degree, I was like, I'm going to go into gallery work. I'm going to be a gallerist. I'm going to be an art dealer, because I thought that that would give me an identity, and I thought that it would give me a cool identity. I thought that it would make me someone that people wanted to be near, because it was coming from this deep compensation of wanting to have and create the things that I didn't have growing up. I didn't have a family that was in the art world. I didn't have a family that collected art. Like I wasn't from like a bougie background. And I was compensating through trying to create that for myself, and realizing, arriving at the gallery and finding myself sort of doing the things that I felt like I was supposed to be doing, except I was in mounting debt because I couldn't afford to live that lifestyle, because I didn't wasn't that lifestyle. And so fragmented, so fractured in my identity, so just like confused, was the first quarter of my 20s. And that was just the beginning of like so many ego deaths, so many ego deaths, of recognizing that what I was trying to build and create for myself, both in my career and then also in my relationships, the people that I was gravitating towards and the people who were gravitating towards me at that time were not healthy, sustainable, honest, authentic people. And having just like a glimmer of like, this isn't you somewhere in the back of my consciousness is ultimately what I also have kind of built my entire career on, ironically, or maybe perfectly, or I say this thing called tank, there are no coincidences, because it took, I had to sort of excavate so many different layers of bullshit, in order for me to be like, well, what is true about who I am? What is true about what I want? What is true about my story, my narrative, like my experiences, because it had been so piecemeal at that up until that time.
Yeah, definitely.
I also think that I just want to mention how cool it is that you have this. So you're born under a full moon, and I love, so full moons are always about opposites, and you have kind of like the full moon, which is, you know, because it's on the Aries Libra axis. So it's all about self and then other. And then of course, like you have higher self baked into your titles, right? It's like everything is under the language of higher self, and then that self is Aries, and that's your moon, which is your emotional inner self. And then that duality of the full moon back and forth is so captured in your work as having that sort of like bifurcated, you know, dual narration going on.
Yeah. And I have like a stellium in Libra too, I think.
Right, which is also just
Yeah.
in and of itself, like even if you weren't born under a full moon, has the qualities
Yeah.
of balance and duality.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, honestly, it's like for me, it's just been a constant thing about getting out of my own way, you know, and like fighting that part of myself that is so self-critical. It's been both like actually like I've used that so much in so many ways to actually like tell this story, like, you know, and people to be able to relate to that voice. But it is still a challenge to like, to quiet it. And I'm still working. It'll be a lifelong journey of that. So,
With the sort of content that you create, where does the inspiration from that come from? Is it you in your moment? Do you plan in advance? Do you have sort of certain themes that you like to go back to, or what is your process of coming up with those, I mean, like storylines, really? They're short videos, but they still have a storyline.
Yeah, I think I just really pull from my own personal life. Just because I did, you know, I struggled. I come from Mexican and Samoan background. So there's like the cultural clash. I come from a family who comparatively was not in the best financial state according to like where I grew up. So we grew up around a lot of racism. I came out when I was 15 and was rejected by my family. I ended up being in like a mental hospital as a teenager. So all of these experiences, I feel like kind of tell this whole kind of very complete story. Actually, the book that I'm writing right now is each chapter is about a different topic, from gender to religion or spirituality to social media, to like, you know, all of these different aspects. And I've been kind of pulling personal anecdotes from my own life to help tell that story. And I'm just like actually kind of understanding it as I'm writing the book, which is really hilarious. It's like it's actually writing it is having another meta spiritual experience, because I'm seeing how all of this stuff has been connected in order for me to talk about all of these things and where it actually does come from, and all of those experiences that have led to those beliefs of me not being enough. I was forced to find that voice of my higher self, because I couldn't rely on the validation of my family. You know, when you're a young person and that's stripped away from you, where the people that are supposed to love you tell you that, you know, you're wrong, you're forced to be in a position where you listen to your inner voice, and you know that you're not, you know. So all of those experiences, I feel like, have slowly added to me finding my own sense of validation and my own sense of self-acceptance and what that really is, and how we all have that. And actually that's who we all are. And that's
Right.
also helped me like heal all of those relationships too, you know, realizing that the other people in my life, you know, my family has their own set of conditioning and their own wounds and their own trauma. And, you know, that's all we are doing. You know, we're all in a different position in this journey of awakening to our true selves, to our higher selves. So yeah, I guess it just kind of pops in my head, really. And I'm sure it has a lot to do with my experiences. And even if I'm not necessarily conscious of it.
Mm-hmm. What I love about it is that, I mean, first of all, there's such a compassion. Your higher self is so compassionate. And as a Pisces moon, there's nothing that makes me happier than a compassionate higher self. Like that is so lovely and beautiful and kind. And do you think that that is the nature of the higher self? Do you think that the higher
Yes.
self is always kind?
Yes, because I think that higher self is constantly patient and compassionate, because higher self knows who you are even when you don't. Like everybody has a higher self, even if they're not conscious of it, because everybody is born whole. But, through when we are socialized in this world and we have all these experiences, we start to believe that we actually need these outside validations. And we start to believe the system of hierarchy as the truth, as reality, when actually it's not. These are just concepts that have been created in human culture. And so when you realize that you are enough just how you are, it's like you understand that shame and guilt and negativity and criticism actually doesn't help you. If you think about when you're a kid, like if somebody is shaming you for misbehaving or encouraging you and like telling you, hey, I really care about you, that's why I don't want you to do that. There's love is really the only power in the situation. And I guess that's really the message of the whole thing, that love is actually the only reality. And it's the only way we're actually going to change the consciousness of the planet, because basically what we've been doing is just doing the same thing over and over again, and we need that shift in our consciousness in order to evolve and survive as a species. I mean, there's no way we're going to be able to make it until we realize that we're actually all one. And to me, that's what love is the realization that we are one and that we are complete just how we are, and everybody is. So when you try to see through that lens, it's not like you get taken advantage of or like condone harmful behavior. You actually are able to see the truth. You're actually able to see why people do what they do. And you're actually able to make better boundaries because you understand your worth and you don't want to enable that type of behavior either. So to me, I mean, the only real place of power is compassion. That's really the only place where you're truly in power.
I love that. That's so beautiful and so resonant. I think about shame a lot. I think about the paralyzing nature of shame and how shame really prevents us from being able to express our truth. Because if we feel like we are going to get in trouble, if we feel like we're going to be judged, if we feel like we're going to be ridiculed, we end up obviously like, chopping off parts of ourselves, chopping off, trying to truncate ourselves and make ourselves fit into these boxes that have nothing to do with our own form at all. And the process of, how can we be compassionate for ourselves, recognize ourselves as complex beings that are neither good nor bad, but just simply are, and are these incredible multidimensional forces that do sometimes the most like incredible, generous, courageous things, and then also things that we're not proud of. And without judgment, being able to accept all of that as truth without bringing in a layer of shame. Like to me, that is always what I'm trying to get shame out of the equation as much as possible, because I feel like it is one of the largest obstacles for so many, including myself, to maneuver.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, you know, spiritual people or people who are really trying to be on the path of inner growth can be the hardest on themselves because they believe that they need to be in order to be better. And I just feel so much that the spiritual path isn't about reaching at some point in the future, like being better, a better person. It's really about accepting who you are in the moment, because that's actually the only thing that's real. Otherwise, everything else is just like a projection of on the future or the past. So I like to think of higher self as kind of like, you know, how you like that higher self is kind of, your higher self is kind of looking at you, how you would see a child, you know, making mistakes because they didn't know better, or, you know, and just with like a total compassionate heart guiding you to the right path. That's kind of how I try to approach thinking about it. Because actually I had the reason why I really channeled into that is when I was going through that really hard time in 2016, and I was at a really low point.
That was my really low point too.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
2016. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was bad. And, you know, it was like the point where I was like, is love real? You know, like it was like that. And I was like sitting on the edge of my bed, and I was just really low, like super low. And I just kind of closed my eyes, and I just had this vision of myself, like on the edge of the bed, like I was watching myself, and I could see myself. And then I like came next to myself, and I like held myself, and I was like, it's okay. Like, you're okay. Just how you are. Like, everything is okay. And it was just such a feeling of like relief, just such a feeling of relief to be able to tell myself that, you know? And I kind of like came out of it and realized that it was really myself that I was looking for, you know?
That's so
And
beautiful.
that's when I started with that voice, really started accessing that voice. I mean, I had glimpses before. I'd been like on a spiritual path for a long time, but that was a very transformative experience for me. And that's kind of how I've approached it, you know, that total compassion, that total acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah. That was in 2016, when I ran out of money again and had to sell all of my earthly belongings, move back to New York, confront the addiction in my family head on, alone, by myself, no like career, no identity, everything was gone at that point, you know, because I had been wrung out through what started as like, oh, I guess gallery work isn't for me, into like a whole host of other crazy things for like 6 or 7 years, finally back in New York. And I had a sort of similar breakthrough, which was like a surrender, you know, it was a surrender in recognizing that I was fighting so hard for what, you know, and it wasn't I wasn't throwing in the towel. It was like it was a really empowered surrender of like, yeah, you have no money. Like, yeah, you have like, there's no plan. You are alone. You are in this by yourself. Like, that's all true. You know, these things are all true. And allowing those to just be true rather than to fight them or try to make them more digestible or make them more accessible, like actually gave me so much confidence and so much and the ability to keep going in a way that when I felt like I was just like, you know, being dragged along on the back of a car, trying to pretend like all of this wasn't happening. Like I was getting so ripped up trying to trying to fix everything. And then to just not fix anything and just be like, this is where you're at, you know, this is what it is, it opened up possibilities and potential that I had no idea that I could even access.
Yeah. And also being able to have those realizations in times that are hard are going to help you, because there's going to be other hard times in your life. We're all going to face difficult situations. We're going to face loss, pain, suffering. That is part of the human experience.
It is. Yeah.
And if you don't know who you are really in your depth, when things are taken away from you, you're going to not be okay. And unless you're really grounded in a sense of identity that is beyond all of this stuff, all of these things, our jobs, our relationships, our bodies, our possessions. And that's the benefit of having, those down and out times in our life, is that you learn that when everything's taken away, you really kind of find yourself. So a lot of the things that I try to talk to people about, is it about like, okay, how do I fix, this, or how do I reach every goal? It's, for me, I like to really focus on making the goal, accepting yourself now, because that's actually what's going to sustain all of that. All of that stuff will just happen naturally like that.
Right.
It's all just going to happen, but being really grounded and being like, I am enough right now, just like at right now. And I always have been, actually, like, that's the truth of the situation, is going to really change, how you experience all the ups and downs.
Yeah, totally. And it's something that I also wrote about in my book, This Is Your Destiny, that came out last year, and it was similarly, I can relate to the process of like writing and being like, oh shit, like that is what it is. Because in that, it was like, recognizing that in the chapter on love, like so much of what I would hear with my clients is like, oh, like, when I'm have a job, or when I reach this goal weight, or when I do this, then I'm going to put myself out there and try to start dating. And that is a losing battle, because it creates what it says to the universe, to yourself, is that you're not good enough. And that there are certain things that have to change about you in order for you to be received and accepted. And that's just not the case. You're always good enough. You're always, it's always the right time for you to lean in and to move towards the things that you want. You're never going to be better than you are in the moment that you are in right now. You simply can't be, because there's no better. It's just a process. It's the growth. It's the journey. Yeah. So you're going to change, but you're not going to be better. There's no morality associated with it.
Yeah. And also too, I mean, if there's one thing I've learned, is that once you get the good thing, it's like, okay, what's next? It's just like, it satisfies you for like a second. And then you're on to the next thing that will make you better. If you're always looking for that kind of, if you're always trying to fulfill that sense of lack, it's never going to be enough.
Right. And then where does that lack even come from? I would say that it is maybe a bastardization of some evolutionary biological things within us, but it also really is a byproduct of marketing. Everything that is being sold to us all the time is being sold because we need something better. I just bought a bathing suit, true story of right now, because they were like, this is the best bathing suit. All your other bathing suits are shit. This is the best one. And if you get this, you're going to have the best bathing suit. And I was like, fuck yeah, I need the best bathing suit. But that's a microcosm of the type of conditioning of the experience that we have growing up here, at least here in the United States, where we are bombarded with commercials and advertising and the intention is to sell, the intention is to make money. So if from such a young age, we're learning that we're wearing the wrong jeans, that we need to be doing our hair differently, that there's a better way that we could be meditating, there's a better way we could be exercising, there's a better way we could be optimizing, then we're always going to be trying to seek that, because that is what we are being told constantly. So it's, to sort of say, actually, I'm good, as like as on an existential is really an act of, to me, it's very subversive, because it goes against all of the whole structure. The whole structure is saying that you aren't good enough. So to say, actually, I'm good, is like one of the most rebellious, punk, contentious things that anyone can do.
Yeah. And it actually empowers you to really enjoy stuff too.
Yeah.
Like when you don't see your relationship as fulfilling a sense of lack, you actually get to know the person for who they are and you're actually present with them. And, you don't put that pressure on the relationship, ultimately destroying it because it's supposed to like make you complete or whatever, we tell ourselves relationships are supposed to do, or even your bathing suit, you can actually enjoy the beauty of the bathing suit without thinking it's going to make you better or as a person or more beautiful because you have it. So it's funny because we think that, oh, if we let go of trying to reach for those goals or trying to better ourselves, like we're somehow going to be like not experiencing any joy or something. It's actually the opposite, because you can actually experience and enjoy things way more when you don't need them or you're not attached to them in order to fulfill you. You actually get to really have a good time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So I would love to ask you the two questions that I ask every guest on this show. The first is, what do you believe in?
I believe in our capacity to love each other.
Beautiful. Perfect. Well, I mean, no notes. Great answer. Question number two is, how does magic show up in your life?
Let me think about that. I guess magic shows up in the recognition that actually that's what's real, and and this like form reality isn't. So I guess magic shows up every time I channel in to that sense of the beyond, which I try to do as much as possible throughout the day. I really like to think of magic as like turning on a light, and that we all have that kind of access. I really think of it as just like chanting into actually what's real.
Yeah, totally. So I would love to pull a card for you if you are interested. I have the deck that I have in front of me right now is the Black Moon Astrology. Let's see what it's actually called. Black Moon Astrology cards. It's an oracle deck. When I have my tarot deck, I have this very, that deck says you need to have a very specific question in order to pull a card, or else we're not gonna, or else good luck interpreting it. This deck is a little different. This gives us a little bit more, this is more like archetype based. So it gives us a little bit more room for interpretation. So I would love to invite you to ask an open-ended question, a question that might not be as specific as it would be if we were using the tarot. Something that we could pull a card to understand sort of the imagery, the archetypes, the symbolism of what this deck offers.
I'm having a hard time understanding which question to ask. Like, what do you mean open-ended?
Like, it doesn't have to be what is going to happen. Like, I have a project coming up tomorrow. What's that going to look like? This could be more of like, what is the, like, what is something I need to know about right now? Or like, what is the vibe of the spring? It could be sort of more sweeping and general and less like hyper focused and specific.
Okay. What is the vibe I need to make healthier choices about my body?
Okay, cool. I can absolutely work with that. Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful. Okay. What do you need to know in order to make healthier choices about your body?
Yes.
All right. Would you like me to work with pile 1, 2, or 3?
3.
All right. What does Bunny need to know in order to make healthier choices about their body? Saturn return, age is what the keyword is associated with this card, but you're like, no, it's not Saturn. I would say what comes up to me immediately is being like kind to yourself about the fact that your body is like the most important thing that it can do is take care of you, you know? And the focus, what this card says in response to that question to me is like, focus less on the most significant thing is like, is it functioning? You know, is it healthy? Is it doing what it needs to do in order to support you and keep you alive and to keep you being able to create the art that you want to create? That's the most important baseline. And then anything else beyond that is, you know, unnecessary. The most necessary thing is like, is this a sustainable, like container vessel? And how can I continue to sustain this vessel and just focus on that as the movement rather than anything else that could be pulling your attention into more like disordered thinking about it.
Yeah. That also makes me feel like even just acknowledging even just being grateful, will help for what my sweet body does for me every day. Thank you, body, you know?
Yeah, totally. And, you know, the Saturn return, having this card come up, age, you know, like that feels, the gravity of that is the gravity of it. I mean, it's very tank. It's very, there are no coincidences. Like I have, my grandmother is 92. She's in a nursing home. She was my closest relative. And seeing someone when they get into their 90s and seeing, you know, just the natural changes of the body and that the body doesn't do the same things that it does when you're younger. I think that is so profoundly significant. And for me has been very healing and very sobering in like my gratitude of like, yeah, it's not, my body is not like, there's things that I wish it would do differently, but I'm also just really grateful to have the youth that I still have while I still have it, because it's not going to last forever.
Yeah. It's so funny
it's
too,
old
like
people, Saturn, you know?
Yeah. And Saturn has been such a big theme of my life right now. So it's like, I feel like it's like
there he is.
It's
Saturn.
like it's like slow realizations and like, okay, you know, and you know, it's so funny too that we tend to define healthy as like six-pack or something, you know what I mean? Like our whole concept of healthy, and when you tell yourself that you're not healthy, or, you know, like that you don't have a healthy body or whatever, how it really ingrains that into your belief. And it's just not true.
No, it's not. And you know, it's like the diet culture, pharmaceutical culture, you know, medical marketing, like is probably some of the most disgusting and, you know, demonic, frankly, of all of it, because it creates correlations between, you know, what we think healthy is and then also what we think beauty is. And it doesn't do a very good job separating like what is actually going to keep someone alive. And then also like what the fucked up, you know, white supremacy societal standards are. And it doesn't delineate that. It just folds them into each other.
Yes, absolutely. And I talk about this stuff all of the time. And it's so funny how like you tell people like about all of these concepts, and then you find yourself that you really need to practice the things that you preach.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's always it's a practice.
Yeah, it's a practice.
It's a practice. It's like one has to like commit to it being a practice, because there's definitely no like, well, I'm spiritually awakened.
Yeah, exactly.
No more will I have feelings of limitations or doubt or criticisms about myself.
Actually, I just realized that's kind of like the coolest part about aging, is that you're just like having different experiences all of the time, faced with different challenges all of the time. you know, at every as time goes by.
Wow, you
Because
just
you
really
can't have
channeled Saturn right there. You're like, the coolest thing about aging is that it just gets harder. Fuck yeah. No, but as a Capricorn rising, I hear you. I co-sign. I
Yeah.
co-sign for sure. It is the coolest part about aging.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild.
Where can our listeners find you and connect with you and be on this journey with you?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram at Bunny Michael. You can listen to XO Higher Self podcasts everywhere where podcasts are. And I'd love for you to check out the web series, which is at whatwoulldhigherselfdo.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation.